Rasmus?
Yeah, hello. Which one do you have, 3 or 4? Which one?
It's number 2. Oh, sorry.
It's number 2,
Okay.
number 2. Thank you very much.
And Randi, you're sharing with Rasmus, is that right?
I don't know. Yeah,
Yes.
we should put
Very
it on
good.
the table. Is that?
Could somebody in the virtual audience just quickly use the chat to reassure us that you can hear us?
Can you say something online?
Or even just wave? Sounds like perhaps they cannot hear us. Sylvia, can you hear us? Okay, that sounds.
Yes, I do. Sorry, I can hear
Okay.
you. Okay, I
Thank
can
you so
hear
much,
you
Sylvia.
and see you. Yeah.
Very good.
Fantastic.
And if you could put the camera to the stage.
It is on the stage though, but we can do like this.
Perfect. Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you to all of you who have traveled hundreds or thousands of miles to be here. And thanks to all of you who have gotten up at inconvenient times in your own time. Thank you so much. I'm Dan McKanan. I am one of the co-chairs of the International Communal Studies Association, and I am thrilled to welcome everyone to our opening plenary session. I want to start with a few thank yous before I introduce our panelists. Thank you so much to all of the people of the Hertha community, beginning with Ola Uggerby and including so many others that you will be interacting with over the next few days for doing the work of making it possible for us to be here in the beautiful space of the Oudonacon, enjoying the rich communal commitment of Danish society. Thank you so much. And thanks also to the Hertha volunteers who've been helping those of us who are staying in the Oudonacon with our breakfasts and are doing some of the cleanup and registration and direction giving and all that sort of stuff. Thanks to all of you. Thank you to the people at Corporate Cooking who are preparing our lunches and suppers and keeping us well fed as we go about our business. And thank you so very much to our fearless tech team of Klaus, Amadou, and Kai. They have done double duty. They signed up to be our tech team and have also wound up being our Wi-Fi improvement squad. I thought I was up late last night updating the conference schedule online, but Klaus was still here installing routers and other such things. So thank you so much, Klaus. It's really been above and beyond the call of duty. As we begin the substance of our work, I want to say a few things about our hybrid format. We are doing everything we can to help those of you who are here in person and those of you who are participating remotely experience this conference in its fullness, including the opportunity to get to know one another, build connections of scholarship and community building. Within each session, we have multiple people who are here to help you out. I, for example, am the room chair, which means I'm interacting with the people in the room. Taisa is our Zoom chair, responsible for social interactions in the Zoom room. Sala is our Zoom tech, responsible for helping you out if you're participating remotely and you're having some troubles. And finally, in this room, Klaus is our room tech, managing all of the equipment here in the room. Slightly different people will be playing these roles in each session. We are all still learning our roles and how to work together. The most important thing that we learned in the tech rehearsal yesterday is that we all need to be patient. Sometimes half of us are ready to start a session and the other half aren't ready yet. And we need to take a moment and sometimes repeat something to make sure that everybody's included. So if there are ways in which you're not fully included, please do what you can to let us know. We will try to attend to that. And if there are ways that you see that others could be included more fully, and you can just step in and make that happen, we invite everyone to go ahead and step in and make that happen using the skills that you have. Nobody here has all the skills that are necessary to make this conference a success. We need everyone to do your part. Few quick notes on the space here in the Odonicon. This room is the auditorium. The restrooms are across the hall and a little bit over that way. The Ost or East room is to my right. If you go out to the right, to the breakfast room at the end and then take a very sharp right, you'll find that meeting room. The Vest or West room is kind of the opposite. Out to my left through the volunteer lounge and then sharp left into that room. The atelier, which is where the meals are served, is upstairs, and to get there you go out to the right and then take the first door on the right, and that leads you into the stairwell. Ola, is there anything else that people should know to navigate their way around the Odonicon? Yes, no. Very good. Thank you so much. I'm now delighted to introduce this opening plenary on intentional communities in Denmark. Those of us who were able to participate in the pre-conference tour have already gotten a rich sense of how many lively and rapidly growing communities there are just within an hour's drive of the Odonicon, with more, it seems, getting started every day. So we've really been blessed to get to know the Danish communal experience. And this morning's panelists will share a little bit more of that variety for the benefit of those who aren't able to participate in our tours. And I'm going to introduce all of them, and then they will each speak in turn. Our first panelist may need no introduction for many of you who've been involved in eco-villages in Denmark and around the world. Ross Jackson is chairman of Gaia Trust, a Danish-based charitable entity he co-founded in 1987 to promote a more sustainable and spiritual world. Gaia Trust has financed hundreds of sustainability projects in over 30 countries, as well as several green startups in Denmark, and continues to support two major international NGO initiatives, the Global Eco-Village Network and Gaia Education. Canadian by birth and a Danish citizen since 1972, Ross was trained in engineering, physics, industrial management, and operations research. He's worked in consulting, software design, and international finance, and is now developing a novel type of computer model for a modern economy that challenges the conventional thinking about how the economy works. Our next two panelists both come from the Hertha community, which has been our anchor for the conference. Rasmus Lading is trained as a Waldorf teacher and has worked at the Rudolf Steiner School in Skanderborg, basically in our backyard here at the Odonicon, at Hertha, and in the administration of the Odonicon. He lives nearby with his wife and two daughters, Sif and Ross, Gaia. Randi Jacobsen has lived and worked at Hertha since 2006 and currently serves in the bakery as a drama teacher and as volunteer coordinator. She was trained as an actor at London's Academy Drama School and also trained as a massage therapist and Bach flower essence therapist. Camilla Nielsen-Englyst has lived at the Hallingslilla Eco-Village since its founding. She's worked as an international consultant with the Danish Red Cross Youth Movement and as international project coordinator for Landsforeningen for Økosamfund, which is the Danish network of eco-villages. She also works with Ross Jackson at Baribo, which seeks to establish sustainable communities accessible to the average Danish person. And she's involved in 4 different research projects. Our final panelist, Peter Højgaard-Olsen, is a Dane who spent 25 years pursuing a business career in Australia. His youngest son has a physical disability that fueled a paradigm shift in their family life. In 2014, Peter exited his business activities and focused on the family and on building a new model of social integration and fully sustainable living. In 2019, Peter returned to Denmark to realize this vision in the form of the integrated living community. This is a model that addresses the fundamental issues we as a society face in relation to how we live, work, and integrate. Thanks so much to all of you for being here, and Ross, you can get us started.
Thanks very much, Dan. I was thinking today that I would take you through what I call the evolution of the equal age movement, seen from a sort of personal perspective. And I hope that your takeaway after my talk today would be a better understanding of how the equal age movement relates historically to what's been happening around us and what will be happening. To understand the origins, at least from a personal perspective, we have to go back to Denmark around 1970. This is the time when the co-housing movement began. At about that time, my wife and I were one of the co-founders of one of the first 3 co-housings here in Denmark. The background was that many women were beginning to enter the workforce at that time. And many young women were faced with the dilemma whether they're going to focus on having a career or the traditional housewife who stays at home. And both of those were unattractive to many young women at that time, including my own wife. On the one hand, you could follow a career and then put the kids in a daycare, or you can stay home and take care of them, have that personal contact with them, but perhaps at the cost of your career. So we, together with 3 or 4 other couples, decided to try something quite different, which was very revolutionary at that time. At that time, people were living very much isolated from each other in apartment buildings or in the suburbs in a house surrounded by hedges and fences and things. But we wanted to develop a more of a communal approach where we could have our individual houses, but we'd also have some common facilities, a common house, for example, where we could meet, have parties, hold meetings and so forth. And we wanted also to create a safe space for children. So we would, the idea was to build the houses in a kind of a circular arrangement with open spaces in between where the kids could play, and no fences or hedges in between, no cars. At that time, cars were normally, there was 1 car for each house, or sometimes 2 in a garage. We wanted the cars to be peripheral, outside of the circle, so to speak. And this was the basic concept of the co-housing movement. And it turned out to be very successful, especially for bringing up children. And the idea caught on over the next few years and started to spread beyond Denmark into the United States and other European countries, Australia and so forth. So it was a pretty big success seen over the longer period. Interestingly enough, in Denmark, most of the co-housings which have been built since then have been for seniors rather than for younger couples. But that was a development we did not foresee at the time. So there was another event that happened, by the way, I must mention around that same time, which influenced me very much in my own thinking. Some of you may recall the book called The Limits to Growth that came out in 1972. And in this computer-based model, it was suggesting that if there were no changes in our strategy over the next 50 to 100 years, that we were heading for some kind of a collapse. When you look at the population growth, you look at the technological growth, and you look at the pollution growth and the uses of resources, they were saying we're heading for a possible collapse sometime in the 21st century. That made an impact on me. And it's relevant to what happened 20 years later for me personally. So if we now go forward, say, to the late 1980s, this was a shift in thinking. Now, the co-housing movement was a strictly social movement. There was not much talk about environment back in 1970, but by the late 1980s, there was a lot of talk about environment. And my wife and I, we began to think in terms of going beyond the co-housing and adding a new element, the ecological element, to our own personal lives. And so we moved away from the co-housing to a farm in the western part of Denmark, where we wanted to be able to grow food, have windmills, and have animals and so forth. And this was what we would probably call an eco-village today, but the word did not actually exist at that time. So what we did then, once we moved, was we invited a number of friends from around the world who we knew were thinking along similar lines to discuss with us how Gaia Trust could use the funds which were gradually being created. And we're about a dozen people who met for a week or so. And the interesting thing was that after this week of discussion and debating the various strategies, we came to a conclusion, and that was that, first of all, we know what all the problems are, the environmental problems, and we know, in fact, what the solutions are. And so what we really needed was implementation of these ideas. The idea is we don't need more conferences, we don't need more papers, we need action. And so we asked around and said, who is actually doing something? Who is actually walking their talk and doing something on the ground to make this planet more livable? And this is when these few projects, which later became to be known as eco-villages, caught our attention. Places like Findhorn in Scotland, Damanhur in Italy, Oroville in India, Solheimer in Iceland. These were projects which had existed for some time. And so we thought, these are the kind of people we should be supporting. And we got the idea arose that what if we, rather than looking at them as individual projects, could envision connecting them all together in a network, which eventually could be a global network. Such a vision could possibly be very important in the longer term, because going back to the limits to growth idea, we were looking at a possible collapse, looking into another 30, 40 years ahead. And my thinking at that time was that if we do have a collapse at some point, that the eco-villages might be a place to restart, a place where we could start to rebuild based on a different value system. So that was sort of the thinking at the time. In fact, I was thinking that it was actually a 40-year project at that time, until we could reach the critical mass that might be necessary. So over the next few years, we met together, a number of us, and finally we founded the Global Eco-Village Network in 1995 at Findhorn. And from then on, we started building up these networks around the world. We had 3 offices, one in North America under the leadership of Albert Bates, one here in Europe under the leadership of Declan Kennedy at Lebensgarten in Germany, and one in Australia for the Asian region led by Max Lindiger at Crystal Waters. They were the 3 who really started things moving. So over the next few years, I traveled around quite a bit around the world together with the Gen board, and came across many different countries and different cultures. And one of the things that really struck me was the fact that no matter where we went, whether it was Brazil or Mexico, Thailand, Russia, Sri Lanka, we were met in all these different places. It was as if it was one large family. That was the thing. We were immediately on the same wavelength, no matter where we were. And there it really struck me that the thing that kept us together on the same wavelength had nothing to do with the color of the skin or the religion or the culture. It had to do with the values. And the values I could best summarize as care of the earth, care of each other. This is what linked us together across these various boundaries of culture and race and so on. And this was the very opposite of the dominating culture of our time, which is still the dominating culture today, which is exploitative, exploitation of the environment, exploitation of people. That is basically what we've been doing for thousands of years, actually. And the whole idea of the eco-village movement and the vision of the long run is to shift that around and actually do the very opposite. So if we go forward a little further again, beyond the time of developing the networks, in fact, coming up to the current time, we can ask ourselves, what is the situation today and what is the situation looking forward? And I would say today, we are on the cusp of a new period, a new phase in the evolution on the planet and also for the movement. One of the things that's going to dominate the near future, the next 10, 20 years, is the fact that the solar energy has become so cheap relative to fossil fuels. And we're seeing a revolution in that direction. And what that's going to mean is that we're going to become a much more decentralized world with solar panels on every house and that sort of thing. And we're going to have a decentralized society with more focus on local, regional development. And this is going to put a great emphasis on economics. Now, in the Gaia education curriculum, some of you may know, we developed what's called the sustainability circle, and which has these 4 dimensions, which come from those 4 areas I've been mentioning: the social dimension, the ecological dimension, the worldview dimension, which addresses culture and spirituality, and finally the economic dimension. So these 4 dimensions are really what describe what life is all about, and of course what the design of communities should be all about. And so I foresee now that the eco-village movement is not soon to be in a position to be able to really have an influence on what's developing. I mentioned earlier this limited growth idea that the eco-villages could be a place to rebuild after a collapse. And I think it's very interesting to see what has been happening in the Ukraine the last half year. Because when the war started in the Ukraine, people started fleeing from the cities. And where did they go? A lot of them went to eco-villages. I know some examples of eco-villages that had maybe 20 families. Suddenly there were 200 families joining them. A tremendous challenge. But they had the background and the education to be able to get these people organized and to get them understanding that this is going to be a different kind of life. They have to start learning new skills and so forth. But the interesting thing was that this was very much what we imagined much earlier that could happen after a global collapse, that the eco-villages could be a place to rebuild. And I thought it was very interesting to see that this is what was happening in the Ukraine. And Gen Europe was the very day after the war started, we're organizing people helping the Gen Ukraine, our colleagues there, to find ways of getting materials into them and the ways of getting the people out. And we were doing this long before the big aid organizations got off the ground. But Gen Europe was really agile and active to make sure that the people in the Ukraine were getting all the help that they could get from the movement. So I'm just going to round it off by a quote from Ed Trainer, who's an Australian economist and academic. Some of you probably know him. He wrote a book around the turn of the century where he said, quote, "Would it be an exaggeration to say that the emergence of the eco-village movement was the most important event of the 20th century?" Pretty big words, and maybe preposterous, but then he added on, "I don't think so." You know, he did not think it was an exaggeration. And while this does seem a little preposterous at this stage, it may be well true in the long run. What he may have captured here was the fact that this movement was the very opposite of the values of the system which is collapsing. So this system we're in now probably is not going to last all that long, and eventually may be replaced by something very different with the values, as I mentioned, care of the earth, care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Rasmus?
Could we turn on both microphones? Yeah. Good.
Well, Rasmus and I are going to tell you a bit about the community that we live in. That close? Okay. So we come from Herta, which some of you visited the other day. It is a village of 150 people. About 30 of the people living there have got disabilities. And Herta was founded about 26 years ago. And prior to that, they spent maybe 8 years having meetings and preparing and finding a space and location to have this village. The purpose of Hertha is to create homes and workplace for people with disabilities, and this is done in the setting and on the base of anthroposophic Rudolf Steiner's teaching. We are now at a crossroad, but I think Rasmus probably has something to say about that.
Okay, yeah, good. I think one thing that is very fun to talk about when you talk about people with disabilities. I remember when I moved into Hertha, there was this one thing I was thinking about: how would it be to live with these people with disabilities? And I was thinking, oh, will it be hard? But you know what? The easy part to live with is the people with disabilities. It's so easy to live with them, you know. They always come with the same thing. They always say the same things, and they enjoy the little things in life. They enjoy cutting the grass, being at the bakery and doing stuff. So other people can feel more free to other things with their families. So I actually think it's a very good model. I really enjoy it. And the hard part to live with is people like myself, you know. I expect a lot of others, right? And there's also,
I think actually it's important to say, I forgot to say that so there's 30 people with disabilities, and then there is some of us that work and live there, but there's also a large group of people who have their life somewhere else. They go to work, go to school, out in the world, and they come and just live there. And that's the exercise of Hertha, not like a Camp Hill where everyone is focused on the same thing. This is a mixture. It's slightly different.
Yeah, it is. And that's also one of the good things, right? Because you have some that comes from outside, comes back every day, and you have some that lives there. That gives it a very good mixture of different things every day. I really enjoyed that part. And then Hertha has this, I think, special thing. When I talk with some of the elder that has been living there for many years, it's when it's based on Rudolf Steiner. He talks about this thing that if you have, you know, like a rose, the rose every year will just become a rose again. And it's the human's part in life is to make the rose become more than just a rose. So we can paint a rose, we can sing about a rose, but we can also plant a rose together with things and make it beautiful, right? And I think Hertha as a picture is also this about making things become more than they just are in itself, making rooms that are special for this one thing. It could be education, it could be for this person with a disability, or it could be for something else. But Hertha always work with making things more than just what they are in themselves. So it's like fascinating houses, you know, and good materials, and what else it should be that is a part of this, right? That's also, I think, a fundamental thing of Hertha, which is very much based on an aesthetic, really, yeah. And a very clean place to be all the time. Also because of the people with the disabilities, they work there, but they also have the needs of a place that is very clean and very organized and beautiful, right? Yeah.
So yeah, now 26 years later, we formed everything. So what was set out in the purpose has been achieved. We have housing, we have good workplaces, we got lovely homes, every space is full. So the next year, in 23, we will start a journey within the village to re-find our purpose, or because a lot of new people have arrived, and some people are leaving. You know, some of the pioneers, they've given what they needed to give to set it up, and now it's there. So it's going to be very interesting to see for us how we're going to go forward, because what is our purpose now? Is it just to repeat and repeat? We're probably not going to change the fundamental things of it, but we new people, there's people that have to make it their purpose to bring it alive so we can nourish and keep it on a high level, because we have an institution within the village. That institution will always succeed. It has rules and regulations from the state, has things they have to meet. It will always succeed. but our exercise is constantly to integrate our neighbors with the institution. And it's not that easy, because in an institution there are people being paid to spend time and to be there. And other people have to have a work life, a family life. And then in their free time, they have to serve and feed the communities. And that's not equal. And so it's going to be very interesting for us. We would already have done it if it wasn't for COVID, but there we are. But yeah, it would be really interesting to see how we're going to go into the next 25 years.
Yeah, and there's also this part that it's two things, you know, she talked about the state that gives in some regulatives you have to implement in what we're doing, but you also, Hertha is also a part of the state, because we couldn't have all the people with disabilities without the state. You know, Denmark has a lot of taxes, but some of the taxes actually goes to people with disabilities so that they can have some money, so that they can live there, so that they can pay for the food. So Hertha is also a lot driven by the state, actually. And that's the fun part, because what happens to the state will also be a part of Hertha and the other way around, right? So we are very much into the state, and also we have these working places, which Hertha also is a part of at the bakery, but we also have cows and a lot of other things where they work and are paid by the state to work there, right? So they don't have to earn a lot of money to Hertha, because of the state. It actually it works by itself. And that's a very beautiful and good thing to have it that way. So Hertha is very much also a part of the Danish society, I think. And also because of that, I think Randi knows a lot about this evolving into the society. It could be by selling cake and milk, but it could also be a part about having a party or something like that, where you invite people from the outside to come in. So that's many things, which I think is so important, both because we get some money, but also just not too close around yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly. We also have volunteers, which is not, I don't know if you have at your place, but it's very normal in Camp Hills to have volunteers. But we always have young people from around Europe who come and spend a year with us. And there's different systems you can use, but you could use another anthroposophic system, which we choose not to. So we try to attract absolutely normal young people from Europe, and they spend a year and they go back out in the world, hopefully with an inspiration and some thoughts. And we find that very, very inspiring for us as well, to have them living with us. I think we need to stop talking now, but one thing we talked about earlier today, also this morning, was the purpose of Hertha in the future. Now we as a village has to go through that journey, but Aspen and I shared about this, that is probably will be something like, how can we inspire other people? How can we include other people into Hertha more than we're already doing? Because there's some things, some experience now that we gathered that works. But you need to have that spark of purpose to be able to carry on and not dictate, or because we certainly haven't got the solution, but we've just got some experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is it around the time, or?
That's great, thank you.
Good, yeah.
Yes, you hear me? What? Fine. Good. Well, I can say that I never tried to live alone. Since I was 17, I've been living in collectives, and I think I've never lived in a house with less than 6 people living in it. I'm really, really poor in making a dinner for myself. I don't think I ever really do that. But I love cooking in the kitchen with my neighbors. So in that sense, I'm a kind of a full-fledged community kind of person. I live in an eco-village founded 17 years ago. I was part of it in the beginning. Those of you who are on the post tour will go there on Monday. You pronounce it so nicely. Kind of difficult for not Danes to say Højgaard-Olsen. And I think in many ways we are like a typical Danish equivalent. And what is typical? Because I'm also praising the diversity of our equilibriums. But I think it's typical in the sense that all these like dying out villages in the rural areas have a lot of former farms where the land is no more really connected to the farm. And that's a very typical way in Denmark to start an equivillage, is to buy one of these farms and then in the land behind the farm to make an equivillage, which has a benefit that you are connected to an existing village, which might be a benefit, could also be the opposite. But also that you do have a shared farm and facilities from a farm, different kind of buildings and so on, which can then be utilized. Yeah? Better? Okay, good. 17 years ago, it was a little bit new, especially where we are, to establish an equivillage like this. We found out that the existing village, they were full of fear for what we would be like. We came there in the beginning, we were 14 families who lived for 2 years, 2.5, some of us, in little wagons waiting for the building permits. So the existing village actually made petitions against us. These feared people, mostly city people coming outside. But nowadays, when new people move to our municipality, they will be put on a bus and they will take a tour around to see the sites of our municipality. And one of the stops will be in Højgaard-Olsen. So nowadays, the municipality will show around, they show off with our eco-village as if it was kind of their own invention. Even they gave us a lot of trouble in the beginning. But I think that actually has shown also the development from the beginning till now, that we have matured our eco-village into a place which is somehow clean and tidy, some would say. It doesn't look like Christiania, has a lot of very resourceful people who are active both in the political life, in the school boards, in the scout camps, and wherever. We have a lot of self-employed. We pay good taxes. Our houses are some of the most expensive houses in the local neighborhood, which is not an advantage, I would say, but that's a fact. So in many ways, I think we've become like a local resource center. During lockdown, they called to ask whether we wanted to be a test center. Okay, test center in our equipment. So well, we kindly rejected that proposal. But in many ways, we actually do like it that we are seen as a resource. We are 24 houses and one common house, 25 hectares of land. You weren't turned on. I was not turned on. Okay, now I'm turned on. So, can you hear me now? Better? Lovely. Okay. So no, we were not a COVID center, but we do a lot of other things. In that sense, I think we are quite open community. We have a lot of, as I said, entrepreneurs. You have your target groups that you integrate with. I think in our eco-village Højgaard-Olsen, we have had especially refugees from the 2015, when we have a big influx of refugees in Denmark. We put up a program called New Roots and a specific program called Grow, growing plants, growing people, where refugees would come to our eco-villages 4 days a week for 4 months as a rehabilitation program. And I think that program has been important for our whole identity in some ways. It has been running for like 4 years. Now we're also hosting an association that we call the Foundation for Green Integration, which is half refugee run and half Højgaard-Olsen run, to show that we in eco-villages can offer a different kind of Denmark, different kind of home, different kind of connection to newcomers. And I think also now with the Ukrainian situation, the Russian-Ukrainian situation in Højgaard-Olsen, we have also somehow naturally become the hub for eco-villages in Denmark, coordinating the 16 hosts that we have around Denmark. I think right now we have like 30 people living in Herlinge-Lille. Normally we only have 13. So we have this hub of also the people who come here not to be refugees, but to be also activists going around in Denmark talking about it. Sometimes we go to Ross's place and have our little activist hub at his place to also feel the support. And in that sense, I think as an eco-village, we are inclined to work on these, after these values of solidarity and openness. And I think that's also where we continue in Herlinge-Lille. I mean, as you in Herta, we are also in a place where we have to somehow assess ourselves. Like in the beginning, we had this very strong we feeling, and we had an I phase where everybody was building their own houses, kind of, building their nest. Now we have all our cozy eco houses and we live there very nicely together. And then what? We have the GROW project, the new routes, we have the refugees. We had a project with the municipality about people living with dementia who would come to Herlinge-Lille and do practical work instead of being activated in some boring building somewhere. We've done a lot of these things, but I think we are still really in the search now for what can really connect us. In the beginning, Herlinge-Lille was based on permaculture and an openness towards spirituality. And I think those values are still strong, but not as strong as in the beginning. So right now, we're also searching for what is really our intention and how does it live out in our community. Yeah. So that was a bit about Herlinge-Lille. Some of you will come on Monday and we talk more about that eco-village, our own case here. If I should widen the scope a little bit to more general development in Denmark, I will have a talk about that later today, but I think one of the major things that's happening right now in the last 3 to 5 years is a rise of developer-driven communities in Denmark. It has really taken rise and in many ways transforming the former bottom-up approach to communal living to a more top-down approach as well, which is of course like shaking our grounds a little bit. Some are very skeptical towards this in the eco-village movement, and others embrace it and say, whoa, but isn't that our goal? Isn't that our mission? That more people can live together, whether they did it through 5 years of hard work or they do it through a developer where they pay somebody to do it. The result is not the same, but the result is definitely that more people can live alive in communities together. So we are definitely following that with great attention. And right now we can see that all these developers, they are going to the intentional communities, to the eco-villages, asking, do you want to work for us? Because you know what it is about. And we also like, that's a sales trick, right? How can you sell community life without having lived it yourself in some ways? So that's why they're recruiting among our people, kind of. So we are a little bit like skeptical, I would say, in our national network of eco-villages and our co-housing movement, how we are actually going to adapt to a situation where the market for communal living has kind of been taken over by commercial powers. Yeah. So that's a bit new for us, and that's also one of the research projects that I will present today, which is exactly like, what does that actually do to the core of communal living in Denmark, that the developer-driven projects are now on its rise. Yes. Well, I think that's my words for now. Yeah.
Peter, is the mic on?
Long number 7. Out on. Can I have slides? Please. That's going to be hard to see. Can we move it?
I should move.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm going to stand up so I can see what I'm showing you, but Can you see this? You can move that back. No, we move this. As good as you're gonna get. Can people online see this? You go and fix it, okay. Now they can. Hello everyone, good morning. I'm Peter. May you live in interesting times. That's an old Chinese curse. And I brought that up not to dishearten you all, but basically to put us on an alert that we are actually, in fact, living in interesting times. And the outcome of the interesting times is man-made crisis. Probably not. No, that's okay. I'll figure it out. There you go. Man-made crisis. Global warming. We talk about it on a regular basis. It's been an agenda item probably since the 80s. I think Margaret Thatcher was the first one to become famous talking about it. But it doesn't seem to have sunk in because we aren't doing a lot, or we're certainly not doing enough. World food supply, there's plenty of food on the planet, but it's not distributed appropriately. There's lots of people that go without, and there's no reason for that. Well, there are reasons for that, but there shouldn't be. And we have an energy and a health crisis, and the energy and health crisis is tied in with how we exploit our planet. The health bit is very much tied in the ecological way we utilize our crops, how we use our earth, how we use our resources. And all in all, in a very short time frame here, I'll tell you that it's a system. It's the system that's unfit for purpose. So fiddling with the bits of the system is not necessarily going to change anything. So we're going to have to find new models. In plural, we're going to have new models. Here's one. Here's one new model. This is a model where the foundation is about creating a future that gives you, as an individual, purpose and meaning. And people will say, well, obviously, that's part of life, isn't it? In my humble experience on this planet, I would say that a lot of the people in the Western world that I've been surrounded with in my life doesn't seem to have found out what their purpose or meaning in life is. So in other words, it's not as obvious as you'd like to think. So humans have managed to evolve into a way of living that seems to preclude us from figuring and discovering why we're here. So here is a new model. It's called the Integrating Living Community. And it's been under development for the last almost 10 years. Now, the fundamental premise is that as humans, we must work with each other. We cannot work for each other. And the simple example is that if I go to Africa with my great invention and want to save people in Africa and I leave again, well, it lasted while I was there and then everything goes back to normal because I did it for them, not with them. Now, it's a bad example maybe, but it's nevertheless how we operate. So doing stuff with people is a fundamental change we have to take. Now, in this model, there's lots of processes that I can describe, but because I've got very limited time, I'm going to take you through a very simple example that illustrates how the integrated living community evolves. The fundamental for human beings is you need energy and you need food supply. Once you've got energy for warmth and clothing, whatever, then you have to have your food production. And of course, in this sustainable model, you must have green energy and you must have sustainable food production. Once you've got that, you need social integration. You need to be around people. You need to be about people that you care for, you like, you have to belong. People require social, they'll do a lot to participate in any form of social integration. Once you've got social integration, you've got food and energy, the next step is you would like to share what you know. There's a huge benefit and a huge privilege to be part of something where you can tell other people what you know. And that has nothing to do with which degree you've got, what education you did, what expertise you hold. If you are a person with mental disabilities, you still have something to share, you still have something to teach other people. Everybody can contribute. So the illusion that we live in is that you have to have certain skills or certain backgrounds in order to do certain, and that's not true. Everybody can share the knowledge. And in this specific community, it's about the design, the operation, and the production of a sustainable living. Now, to do this, and then my thingamie died. Can you forward for me, please? Yes. Any new model must exist in the current reality of financial systems. There's no good to invent something that people can't subscribe to. They don't have to understand it, but if they can invest in it or they can operate with it, then it will make sense. This model must provide economic return. Next slide, please. Sorry, next step. Now, finally, all these great ideas are no good if they're on their own. They're no good if they sit on a field somewhere and everybody can have a look at it. It has to be scalable, which means that while there are lots of components in this thing, the thing to remember is it's scalable and it's CO2 neutral, right? So it's one way of living on this planet that will benefit us all, and it can be scaled. And finally, if you live in an environment like this, would you believe that you get purpose and you get meaning and you get well-being? Because that's what life is all about. You can contribute. Okay, so what is it? It's sustainable coming housing. Denmark is very famous for called almen housing. I'll talk to you about that in a moment. But we have in Denmark a non-for-profit way of building houses that talks to the lowest common denominator in cost, but that doesn't mean it's poor quality. Social economic business, we must produce a return on investment. If we're going to scale, we're going to have to attract capital. If we're going to have to attract capital, we have to show we can give a return. There are plenty of pension funds and investment funds that want to invest in green initiatives, but they must show a return. Local energy production. Well, sure, we can connect to the grid. We can do what everybody else does, but we all know we have to start, as what was said before, we need to get our own solar system, we need to get our own energy system. Denmark is very good at that. Denmark is very good at producing energy local, so local energy production is not a problem. Car sharing, well, my generation for some reason thinks that it's very cool to have 1 or 2 cars and own them yourself, even though you only drive for maybe 2 or 5% of the time. So in this environment, you can't own your own car because there is a carpooling system. The cars are provided by a third party that makes a profit on that. There's electric cars outside. And because there's a community and because there's a fleet of cars, the energy storage in the cars generates the backed up battery power that's required for energy production. Because what's the problem in the world? The problem is that it doesn't always rain, it doesn't always blow wind, it doesn't always, sun doesn't always shine, so we got to have a place to store the energy. And that's, of course, in the car batteries. Conference and training center, why? Because we have to share what we know. We have to invite people to come and live. They can come as a holiday, or they can come and actually share and learn what this production system is about. What is it about? It's about the coming housing model, a place where families can come and live. It's a place where seniors can go when they want to scale down their housing, or if they're on their own, they want to basically find a smaller place and be part of a community. And it's a place for student accommodation. So it's the whole spectrum of age, and all fit in there. And the fundamental premise is, of course, they all cater for people with disabilities. That means that everybody can live in this community. Social integration model, home, job, education, support within the integrated living community, about 300 and 350 people. I will involve when you come to the workshop about why it's that number, why it's not 1,000, why it's not 100. And the people with disabilities provides an incredible input, just as what you were talking to before, Rasmus, that there is a tremendous learning and benefit from combining us all living together. It's about social integration and it's about environment integration. So social integration, that's about the way we live. The desert that we call our grass or the backyard lawn is really not a good place for insects or things. So we need to live in an environment we produce everywhere you live. You have plants that grow food you can live in or you can live around. And the greenhouse is very suitable in this part of the world because you could spend 6 months of the year outside rather than 6 weeks of the year outside. And you can obviously grow a lot more plants than you can if you don't have that. The left side is about the production side. It doesn't have to be on a farm. It could be in the city. It's about square meter price. You can produce what we intend to produce anywhere, also in the middle of the city. It's called aquaponics. I'm not going to bore you with explaining what aquaponics is. I'll just let you know that aquaponics was invented more than, I think, 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years ago in the Incas or the Maya Indians. And in the last 50 years, it's been very successful around the world. It's for some reason not practiced in Denmark, but soon it will be because we're on the way with it. And it's a simple, optimized way of producing food. It is, as far as I know, the most efficient way of producing food on the planet. And you would ask the EU experts and they will say this is one of the ways we can help save the world food production as we grow in numbers. Housing, yes, well, this is a Danish model. It's a greenhouse that covers your living, whatever the form of your living that you desire. And in that is, of course, completely disability-friendly living. It's built to a standard that's the gold standard, and it's going to be ultimately developed into a sustainable living model that is within a price range, because right now it's too expensive. We haven't learned how to build efficiently enough yet. These are components, the housing, the social integration is what you guys are experts in. And meaning when I say you guys, I'm not living in a community at this point in time. So I can say that the social integration is fundamental to everything. If we can work out how to coexist together in an optimized form, then this has got a future. So we are basically constructing a model for how social integration is going to work in a formal sense. It's a bit like, if you pay your rent and you shovel your snow, well, what can you do? You're part of the community. Well, in this community, there's going to be other rules, and there's got to be other regulations for participating. And if you can't abide by them, well, you've got to find somewhere else to live. Social economic business, this is about making a profit. It's about showing that we can actually produce something that gives a return so that the big capital fund in Copenhagen can say, well, we'll put 300 million into this because we would like to see a return and we think it's a good production. That's the idea. Energy. Not much to say. Denmark knows how to make green energy. Transport, as I said, electric car sharing. And the community center or the training center is about letting other people come from other parts of Denmark, other parts of the world to see how this is done so they can take the knowledge with them and they can invite us over to help them do the same thing. There's a big structure. I won't have time to cover that, but I will close by saying that my favorite statement from Buckminster Fuller is you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. That's what we intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Because you've been disciplined with time, we have about 15 minutes for questions. So if you could empower all the mics up here. Am I on right now? Okay, very good. The way we ask, oh, not quite yet. Do I need to press a button? How about now? Still no. How about now? Very good. So the way we do question and answer in our hybrid format is we alternate between the room chair calling on someone and the Zoom chair calling on someone, assuming there are people in both contexts. So I will go first, and then Taisa will call on someone. So who in the room would like to pose a question for our panel? Go ahead, Aharon.
Camilla?
Is that just a business initiative? Is the government involved in that policy or just organic development?
Oh, I'm sorry, we forgot to give Aharon a mic for the remote people to hear him. So I will just paraphrase the question and then we'll do better the next time. So he was asking Camilla about the phenomenon of top-down developer-driven intentional communities and whether they're purely a kind of capitalist profit thing or if the government is also involved in those initiatives. Oh, maybe he's going to say a little more now. Go ahead.
Denmark is characterized by like four major categories of actors. Some are simply people who see that as a marker because it's really attractive, and they establish huge communities of like 180 houses where people don't know each other before they move in. And when they move in, they have like a social caretaker to arrange yoga and shared dinners and these kind of things. That's a really top-down model that we haven't really seen before in Denmark before these last 3 years. But we also do have like what you talked about, almen bolig, like public housing concepts, where before it was people who would unite and ask the public housing company, can we ally and make this project together? Well, nowadays, where they see it's so successful, they just start doing it on their own, kind of, yeah. Then we have pension funds and whatever, who also want to establish communities. And then we have these new companies that have community living as their core. We have like right now 5, 6 of those who specialize in community living, but build it up in a like top-down process with some diversities, of course. Like I work for one of them, but we do it where we engage the future residents where others don't. So yeah, it's a diversity of options.
Thank you. Taisa, do we have anyone remote? Not yet. Okay, we can take another question from the hall.
Wait.
Wait for the mic. Thank you, Anton.
Maybe say your name first as well.
Oh, okay. My name is Cynthia. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I would welcome thoughts from any of the panelists, but just continuing on this theme, Camilla. So I'm curious, when you hear the presentation of the integrated community living and work with these other developer-led communities, what advice do you give them, drawing from the bottom-up approach of community development, drawing from the eco-village movement? Like I heard you just mention that there's a need to engage the future residents. What other things do you encourage to help engender a community spirit, even in these developer-driven communities? Thank you.
Very short, I can say work on intentions. I mean, right now we have a lot of community projects that are not intentional. And we also see that the people who do live there, they miss having something in common. So when you miss that part, you also get the result when people live there. So yeah, facilitation of community life has become a profession. I'm part of that profession. It's a growing profession. How do we engage people so they find out what they want to do together and these kind of things?
Did anyone else want to speak to that? Go ahead, Randi.
Okay. Sorry. No, it's that you must never forget that it's people. You know, you can build whatever, but that's just buildings. A community is not buildings.
Yeah, and I would just kind of echoing that note, it's not only a challenge for developer-driven communities, often very idealistic communities, precisely because they share their wealth, they become wealthier and they have nicer and nicer buildings, and that reminder that the community is not the nice buildings becomes all the more salient. Taisa, do we have someone online?
Can they not speak? They can speak.
So you're going to read Juan's question, or are we going to let him speak?
Let's try. Oh, I have another question.
Oh yeah, I think I can speak. Can you hear me?
Oh, there he is.
Perfect.
Okay.
Hi, Juan. Go
Hello.
ahead.
Hi there. I was just wondering for the people from Eartha, that they mentioned that unlike Campil, they get volunteers from like outside the world or like from non-anthroposophical like background organizations. And I was wondering how do they advertise, or yeah, how do you get your volunteers? That sounded very interesting.
project called Erasmus.
From Erasmus.
That's their
Okay.
Erasmus, yeah.
Okay.
Association as well.
True.
Okay. Thank you. From what? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Woofing, like woofing, working on
Woofing.
organic farms
Okay.
programs.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Taisa.
Sylvia, do you? Maybe while they're finding out, I can respond again to what you said, Cynthia. Like we have one of the commercial actors in Denmark that took the name ecovillage.dk, which was a bit shocking for us. But and the first thing they did was that they actually put our mandala on their website and on their Facebook page. I mean, with the 4 dimensions of sustainability. Meanwhile, they didn't really know what it meant. So they took it down again because we told them that this is actually like our core. This is what we teach for 4 weeks in the Eco-Village design educations. And so it's not just putting it on your website and say, this is our sustainability model.
Very good. And, oh, Anton's coming with the mic.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm Anne from Germany. I'm actually working at a department at the university which is called Economy of Sustainability, and I'm researching currently about sustainability entrepreneurship. And before that I was working in political science, so I'm just wondering what is the right way to scale up. And I heard you, Ross, saying it's about values, and I feel as if the eco-village movement has a real hard time like advocating their interest into a political sphere. So I'm just wondering whether we could make, like as an eco-village movement, actually make use of that idea of economizing it and just taking this idea of the development enterprises and do it in another way. I heard Mika, who wants to establish like 100 of tiny house projects all over the world. So like adapting this idea and like replicating it is also a part of scaling up the movement, but with the right values, obviously. So just maybe we can learn something from it. And also, like you said, like community advertisement or counseling, or also like, how do you say, consulting is going to be a business. And how can this business be scaled up? Like, bringing this hint and this tips into other spheres. I think this is like something we have to think about, how to integrate ourselves more into the business ideas, but with the right values.
Anyone want to speak to that? So it has to do with just strategies for scaling up, and yeah, I didn't catch everything. So so how you make it more affordable at the larger scale? Oh, come back in.
So the question is, what is the right way going to a political sphere and advocating the ideas of the eco-village movement, or actually going also to the economic sphere and going there and see what we can do on that level to integrate the ideas of the eco-village movement.
So how do you work with political and economic power structures to integrate the ideals of the eco-village movement more widely?
I will give a very short comment. It's just that community life means home, not business. And many people who live in communities, they don't think so much about scaling up and creating businesses and replicating eco-village life and so on. So it's only a few people. a few people who engage in the political spheres and so on. And we do that also in the national network in Denmark, engage politically. And in a response to all the developer-driven communities, we are developing like a start package for new homegrown groups and so on. So we can assist in using the experience that we have earned through so many years. But I don't see many community people so interested in actually scaling up and making businesses out of it. I mean, I'm really looking around for those kind of people in Denmark. I don't see them really.
I can add a couple of comments to that. In the company which I'm involved with here in Denmark, one of the things we've noticed was that a lot of people prefer.
Could you turn the mic on? Just put it closer to your mouth. Oh.
It's such a...
Yeah. So one thing we've noticed is that people seem to prefer much smaller homes than they did, say, 10, 15 years ago. In our company, we offer several different alternatives, right down to 40 square meters and over 130. And we find that in some regions, the great preference is for very small homes. And this is one way of scaling up, is you say to make it more affordable, is by having them much smaller. And in some cases also to have perhaps several families living under the same roof and sharing, say, certain facilities around, like the kitchen and so forth. As far as the involvement of the public, the government and so forth, I think the main way that they're interacting with the movement is sort of based on their own personal experience. For example, one municipality here in Denmark, Roskilde, is undoubtedly, I think, the leader probably in all of Denmark. And I spoke with the responsible person in the municipal administration a year or so ago, and she was telling me that as opposed to, say, 10, 15 years ago, when the eco-village movement, and it was often considered to be a bunch of hippies, you know, and not very attractive, now they're totally turned around. And now they're trying to attract these kinds of people because they found out that they're good citizens, they have jobs, they're active in the community. And so this is a turnaround. And I think that is the sort of thing which is going to affect the scaling up. And I think that's why many other communities are like looking to Roskilde and a couple of others and realizing that they've had, you know, the wrong attitude to this whole movement up to now. They can see that this is something they've got to promote. And many municipalities are actually in their planning, when they're offering, for example, some of their land for sale, they're specifying that there must be a co-housing or eco-village as part of the solution. And that was unheard of 10 years ago. And of course, all of the buildings, new buildings today, have to satisfy much higher ecological criteria than they did 10 years ago. This is all contributing to, I would say, creating more affordable housing and increasing the attractiveness of the whole idea among the governmental people, especially in municipalities.
Thank you so much. It is 10:30, but I know that Taisa was trying to bring some voices in. So if they can make it very quick, we can include them. Yes.
Okay, Sylvia.
Okay, thank you, and hello to everybody. Thank you. You can hear me? Okay, great. Just a little comment because of the discussion you had. I will be very, very quick. I would like to say hello to Camilla because 4 years ago she welcomed me in Alingalil, and she talked to me about the community and the conditions of the founding of the project, and it was really, really interesting and great for my thesis. I was at the time still in research, and now the thesis has been defended, and the legal ill is one of the exemplary fields that I kept for my studies. So I will talk about that this afternoon, I guess, a little bit. And because my angle, my point of view is more about communities and architecture, I would like to say that, yeah, a community is not buildings and is not a building, but the way a community embodies itself with architecture counts a lot. And in Alingalil, it's really a part of the project. project. And also there was the example of freelance. So I think it's really a part of the important of the project. So I will be very quick now because I have a question for Peter. You talked about the greenhouse integration in the dwellings in communities, and if I understand well, you say that it's for now too expensive, but maybe you will tell me. But I would like to know if you tried to look at the Earthships models and proposals that are developed in Taos in Arizona since well, more than 40 years by Michael Reynolds, an architect. And I will talk about that a little bit in my proposal this afternoon. But this is very interesting because it's these architectures are made with, recycled materials and garbage. And he also has an academy of architecture about that, and it's also community. I was just curious to know if you explored a little bit this path. Thank you.
The challenge is not that it's not possible to build with recycled material, and of course, yes, I'm aware of what you're talking about. The challenge is that the scalability comes from the government framework called almen housing in Denmark, because that's about 15 to 20% of the whole housing portfolio in Denmark is made in this framework. That environment has to be taught how to build sustainable. Okay. And they need to understand to use new materials. And doing it privately is not going to allow it to scale. So the challenge for us is really to help them get those skills, not just build houses, but get the skills and make them sustainable.
Okay, that's the regulation is the most, yeah. Okay, I understand. It depends on countries. That's, but I understand that in Denmark it's quite complicated about that. Thank you, Peter.
Yes, go ahead.
We have one question.
Samira, would you like to unmic and ask your question? Unmute, of course, is what I meant.
She's asking if, do we have an idea of the average length of time a person stays in a community?
Yeah. What is the average length of time that a person lives in the communities that you're connected with?
Interesting. That's one of the research projects I'm presenting today that wants to give answers to exactly these questions, because it's good to have these data when we're talking about human rights. I don't have it here in my head, but it's in the paper. Add one little thing about scaling up, very short.
Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. In Denmark, I think from the parliamentary level, there's a huge interest in community living. And there was a working group with a lot of people from this municipality that Ross talked about, pension funds, financial sector, and one grassroots person, me. And in the end, after having identified obstacles and possible solutions, one of the recommendations given from that working group was to establish an advisory unit, which has now been set up. It will take off here in August with 4 employees who will advise on building communities, on co-housing projects, and especially on the public co-housing communities, in order to really put full speed on this with 4 employees, because there are a lot of questions, both from developers, municipalities, housing association, and self-grown groups of how we can really move on with this faster and better. So I think personally, I do have a lot of trust in that now this advisory unit will actually assist us in also trying to somehow mitigate the obstacles that were identified.
Great, thank you. I think we are going to call time now. It is important to have good breaks, to stay in balance for our full 3 days and to get ready for the next session. Those of us who are in person will be able to socialize in person. Those of you who are online, you can stay in this Zoom meeting and chat amongst yourselves over the next 23 minutes. I ask that if you are part of one of the next sessions, either as a presenter or one of the helpers, that you be present physically or virtually in that space at about 15 minutes before the start time. So let's once again thank our panelists.